Hey there, guys. Welcome back to the channel. So, I had a chance to check out one of my most anticipated movie of the year, and it's Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. And it's starring Tom Cruise, and it's the returning director, Christopher McQuarrie. So, this movie's picking up 2 months after Dead Reckoning, and we're now facing with Ethan Hunt, who's going to have to face the entity and to prevent a global annihilation. Now, I was hyped for this movie, and it took a little long time for them to make this film, especially during the writers and actors strike that took a little bit of setbacks and delays because Dead Reckoning came out in 2023 for about like a few years ago. And at first, when Dead Reckoning came out in the theater, it underperformed. It didn't do bad, but it didn't do as much. The box office did not live up to the hype as they were hoping for. But you know what? This movie looked like it was labeled to be the last one of the franchise, and thank God that they changed the title from being a Dead Reckoning Part 2 to just be calling The Final Reckoning, just to let it be its own separate movie. Now, look, I'm a fan of the franchise. I love the Mission Impossible movies. Now, I haven't seen all of them in the theater. I didn't even see the first three movies in theaters. The only time I saw the movie in theater is when starting with Ghost Protocol, the fourth installment, and then I watched the rest of it throughout the whole franchise. I'm not a fan of the first two movies. Look, the first movie was decent, but it was a little bit of a slow burn and a little bit boring at times, but it was still a decent movie, and it was directed by Brian De Palma. And then the second film was my least favorite. It has its moments where there's things that I liked, but it was a little bit of a more over the top action film that just wasn't sitting right with me. And it was directed by John Woo, who directed Face Off with Nicolas Cage and John Travolta. Now, when the third movie came out, that was directed by J.J. Abrams. I loved the third movie. I think it's one of the most underrated sequels of the Mission Impossible franchise that came out in 2000. I think it was like 2006 or 2007. I can't remember. That's where it really brought its footing to the franchise. Most people would arguably say that it was Ghost Protocol, which understandably so, but I thought the third one for me is when it really did, because it really brought more the vulnerability of our protagonist with Ethan Hunt, played by Tom Cruise. And yes, he had done some crazy stunts in the second film when he did the rock climbing. But then when we got to Ghost Protocol, that's when he started to do a lot of these practical stunts of his own and not have any stunt double, doing all these crazy stunts from each installment. And yes, the movie have kept getting better and better and better with these sequels because it was the opposite of what the Fast and Furious did with the franchise, where it started off strong, but then it got weaker and weaker. But for Mission Impossible, it's completely the opposite. Because I will say that I love Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation when Christopher McQuarrie came into the franchise and really set the tone for what the franchise is, and he kept on directing it all the way through, and he had a great closing relationship with Tom Cruise, and he was one of the writers of Top Gun Maverick, which I think they have a great collaboration together, and he stuck with them ever since. We all thought that they were going to see some big time directors coming in and directing each installment, but ever since Rogue Nation, that's when Christopher McQuarrie was locked in from the rest of the franchise, and it kept getting better and better. I will say that Fallout is my favorite of the franchise, and it still is. Dead Reckoning was really good, and I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't as good as Fallout. I will still, to this day, think that Fallout was the peak of the Mission Impossible franchise, in my opinion, but that's just me. And now going into the Final Reckoning, I will say that when I heard about the mixed response from some critics and some audiences, it had the highest score on Rotten Tomatoes, but there were some people out there that were really had mixed feelings on the movie, that it didn't really live up to the hype as they were hoping for. Well, I will say that after coming out of the theater, I will say that I really enjoyed it, and I can understand why some people had mixed feelings on this movie, because the first half of the film had some rough pacing issues to get through, especially with the over exposition, and then we have a lot of the throwbacks with the previous Mission Impossible movies, because this is meant to be the culmination of the franchise. And the things that I had issues with, there's some editing issues choices that I didn't quite like, was that they were showing you a little small recap whenever we come across with certain characters that we've seen in the last movie, or when they show, oh hey, remember that scene in the Mission Impossible movies, in case people haven't seen it or haven't seen it in a long time and they've forgotten. It reminded me of the movie called Matrix Resurrection, where they were taking a bunch of stock footages to explain to the audience of what they're talking about and whose character are they referencing from. That's what I felt coming into that movie. And look, there are some things that I did like, because I like they were able to piggyback on the plot device from Mission Impossible 3, which I won't mention what it is, but I thought that they were able to do a good job of bringing that back and making it such an interconnected to the final installment, which I had a feeling that it was going to happen at some point, because it would be kind of weird that they would want to leave that in mystery and then never brought it up ever again, and how this all started in the first place. The entity, of AI as the main villain from Dead Reckoning was silly, and it was just out of nowhere. And it felt like, okay, are we mimicking Terminator now with Skynet taking over the whole world and causing a global annihilation? But I thought this one was handled a lot better in this one. I still prefer Dead Reckoning more because of the pacing was a little bit better and a little bit on point. This one kind of felt like it had overdone with some of the exposition. I feel like the characters had to over-explain everything about the game plan, and I feel like it was kind of overdone. And some of the characters that we've grown to, most of them didn't really have that much of a personality this time around because they had to basically say similar thing back and forth every time they're discussing the plan, and it just felt like, okay, we get the point. Can we just move this along? There are things that I did like when they were able to bring a certain character back from the previous Mission Impossible movies. I liked that. I did love the submarine scene. The underwater submarine when Tom Cruise is going into the Russian abandoned from submarine inside. He did that practically, and there are some things that they tweaked in CGI. I don't know, because I hope that they show a little bit more behind the scenes of Tom Cruise going underwater. When we see him a single shot take of him going inside the Russian submarine with a full of torpedoes, going underwater for a long period of time. Does it get a little bit of slow and drag at times? Yes, sure, but it still kept you on a little bit of the edge of your seat and trying to make it more realistic as possible, because we already know Tom Cruise. He's going to put himself in danger with all these crazy stunts just to please the audience. And look, I love Hayley Atwell as one of the additions to the team, even though she joined so late in the game, and I thought she was great. I thought she had a great charisma, and she's such an underrated actress because I've known her from the MCU movies. And the actress played by Palm Klementieff. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing her name. You may have known her from who played Mantis in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Yeah, she's playing the assassin that we met in the last movie, and I thought she was a really good addition to the team. But I felt like that they kind of forced her in to switch sides, even though that in the last movie, spoiler alert, if you have not seen Dead Reckoning, she killed a lot of people, even some innocent people, and I kind of get why they did, but I felt like it kind of felt a little bit forced in. But I'm not saying that she was bad. She was great. She can do action. She can have the emotional weight to her performance. I love her in that movie. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trashing on her performance, but I thought some of the character choices was a little odd choice that it felt so forced in. And the tone itself, to me, I get that they were going to go for more serious, but this film felt like it took itself a little bit way too seriously at times, where it becoming a little bit more of a somber tone. Because in the not to compare to the last Mission Impossible movies, but most of the Mission Impossible movies, even though they took itself a little seriously, but they still have some joy and fun to it, and they had some funny moments. And this one, it barely had any of it. And there were times when they were not intended to be funny, but somehow the audiences were laughing in the background, like, yeah, it's sort of funny, but it's not that funny. But that's just me. But I do like appreciate the stakes that they were in with the AI like infiltrating, taking control over these nuclear arsenals. I love the whole stakes that they did. That's something that we normally don't get some movies like that, because it was something that you could have done in the 1990s for a major catastrophe, for a potential of global threat, and it really tries to make you feel a little bit believable, and it adds so much tension and the suspense. This one, they went far beyond with the tensions in the suspense, and I thought it really worked in the second half of the film. Like I said before, the first half was rough to get through with some of the pacing, and there's times where it felt boring, as I mentioned before, they had like a little bit too over exposition, and there's not much action in the film that I was expecting. Sure, there are a few fight scenes in the middle part of the movie, and even the third act finale, because the third act finale really brought it home, especially when we see Tom Cruise hanging on a plane, climbing right across the plane and hanging on as long as he can, even though behind the scenes, Tom Cruise had to be on the safety wire. And the way that they were like twirling around and created evasive maneuvers was insane, and it was stressful as shit, especially when you're watching on an IMAX screen. It's gonna have your gut dropped. It's way more stressful to watch than seeing Tom Cruise climbing on the tallest building in Dubai from Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. This one took it at a whole new level, and you know how Tom Cruise likes to do. He likes to nearly kill himself for the entertainment to please the audience. And look, I think the third act finale really brought it home, and most people say that this did not feel like the final installment of the franchise. I'm right in the middle, where I do believe that this feels like an end send-off to Ethan Hunt's character in the movie, and I thought it was very fulfilling by the end of the film. I just wish they would have like chopped down some 10 to 20 minutes of the runtime because it felt a little bit too long than what it needed to be. I didn't feel like they needed to be that long. There were times where like, okay, come on, look, can we just speed this up? Let's get to the point of the story. I will say that the secondary villain that was from Dead Reckoning and then is brought back in the final Reckoning, the secondary villain was Gabriel, played by Zay Morales. I'm sorry if I'm butchering his first name, but to me, there's not much layers to his character. There's not a lot of depth. I know that he had history with Ethan Hunt from his past, but there's not much depth to him. There's not enough layers to make me want to understand the side of his character. He was literally just a pawn in the entity. That's pretty much it. And when he's off screen, you completely forgot all about him. If you completely take him out of the movie, I don't know how much it would have changed any differently. I feel like he just needed to like bring in someone that can go toe to toe with Ethan Hunt in the third act of the film. And that's pretty much how I felt. He's kind of the most forgettable villain in the Mission Impossible franchise. And with the other character, Agent Eugene, he kind of flip-flops every decision he makes in this movie that kind of had my head scratching. Like he wants to control the entity, then he wants Ethan Hunt to stop him. I don't know. Maybe I'm going a little bit of far off with my nitpicks, but other than that, I feel like he just could have just been left out of the movie. And there's certain character moments where they brought back some the connections to the previous Mission Impossible movies for a certain character, not the one that you're thinking, but a different character, which I won't say who. And I was like, did we really need this? Was that really necessary? Why do I care? It didn't serve any well to the story whatsoever. If you would have not add that in, it wouldn't have changed anything really. But I won't say a certain character who, but I'm not talking about the other character that really served a pivotal role into this movie. I thought that character did great, but the other part that they did, I wish I could say who, but I don't want to spoil it for you guys. But I just thought it was very forgettable, and it's such an afterthought for me. But you know what? It's not a make or break for me. It's not going to make me like it a lot less. This is still a great entertainment. And yeah, there's times where you're going to have to suspend your disbelief and turn your brain off and not like overthink some of the logic in the movie that they do. And I will say that you should definitely rush out to see Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning on an IMAX screen because they shot the third act finale on an IMAX sequences, especially some of the AI visual sequences, which I won't go into it too much without spoiling the plot point for you. I still had a good time watching it. Is it one of my favorite movies of the year? No. Would I go see this again? Absolutely. When I go see this movie again, I might appreciate this movie more on the second viewing. But who knows? We'll see what happens. But as of now, I was fulfilled with this ending, and I'm totally fine if they want to close this off to the franchise. But I wouldn't be surprised if this movie does well and Tom Cruise wants to continue with this franchise. I wouldn't be surprised if he decides to do another one because it definitely left the door open for more. It didn't like feel like a closing chapter, even though it was a definitive end, but it still left the door open for more, which is no surprise because if you watch the previous Mission Impossible movies, aside from Dead Reckoning, most of the Mission Impossible movies, for every installment from the first movie to Fallout, most of them are conclusions. Every movie is a conclusion. So I'm going to give my rating for Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning an 8 out of 10. I wish I would have bumped up my ratings a little bit more, if only if they chop up some of the runtime, make it a little bit more fun and joy and entertainment, but it not take itself way too seriously. It almost reminded me a little bit of the Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight Rises. I hate to make a comparison here. I know it gets very annoying when I say that, but it does feel like a little bit of the Dark Knight Rises. Not as much action, but it's still a little bit more of an exposition to me. But I still prefer The Final Reckoning over The Dark Knight Rises for me, in my opinion. I think it's a better movie for me. Now, what did you think of the Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning? Have you seen it? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you like this review, make sure you hit that like button. And if you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell notifications so you know when my videos are up. And if you want to follow my social media platforms like Instagram, Twitter, the link tree would be down in the description down below. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys have a great day, great evening, wherever you're from, and stay tuned for more of my content.